What I have here is the institutions and key investigators from the 1980s that worked with Carrington Laboratory to try to make a drug out of the active ingredient from the aloe plant. This plant had been used for over 5,000 years by human beings, and because of some remarkable health benefits that a small company was told happened when people drank their aloe juice, they put together some venture capital to do research on the aloe to try to make it a drug. The most important one on this is Texas A&M School of Veterinary Medicine, and there are more people there, and there was more work done with them anywhere else, and it's very interesting because we ran into a wall trying to deal with medical schools. They're all drug oriented. There are 7 medical schools in Texas. Not a one of them have a required course in nutrition for the young doctors. However, there is one veterinary school there at Texas A&M, and the core curriculum, I found out, is nutrition for all the different animals. The veterinarians are taught that you optimize nutrition as your first thing in trying to help the health of an animal, whether it be chickens, sheep, goats, horses, pigs, cows, you name it. Optimize nutrition. And then if you have to, you use expensive drugs on top of that. I found out that the reason for this is veterinarians found out you can't make any money giving expensive drugs to animals. However, if you'll just stop and think, if you can get 2-legged animals with not an awful lot of hair on them to swallow all the drugs or inject all the drugs possible, you can form the most powerful and expensive and profitable drug companies on the planet. And that's the big difference. Now, down in San Antonio, 3 from the bottom is Dr. Gilbert Cates. He was very important in this because he developed a mobile unit to determine the density of different layers of the body, amount of fat, muscle, bone, and percentages. And with this, he could develop biomarkers of aging. And with him, in the year 2000, we published a paper that by optimizing nutrition, you reverse the aging process. One of the reasons I show this slide is I talk about a lot of things and lecture on a lot of things, and I would not want anyone to think that I learned all this on my own and I'm all that smart. All these different people that you have on this slide, my service to Carrington Laboratories back in the 1980s was to take basic science research experiments and observations from all these institutions and research people and try to make applications of what this might do if it were a drug and benefits to human beings. Now, again, this is not a new idea to use plant phytochemicals. Chemicals are nutrient molecules made in plants. One of the oldest references is from the Torah, the first 5 books of the King James Old Testament. In Genesis 1:29, it says, "Behold, and I give you the herbs and seed-bearing plants. For you it shall be meat." I have given this lecture to more Seventh-day Adventist groups than any other, and they tend to be vegetarians and vegans, primarily because of the guidance they're given from Daniel, 1st chapter, about the 12th to 15th verses, where when the Hebrew children were taken to Nebuchadnezzar's country, away from Judea, he saw these big, healthy Jewish boys. He says, I want them to be in my court and in my service. Have them eat at my table. And he says, we're not going to eat at your table. All we want is vegetables, nuts, and fruits, and water. Oh, no, we want you to have the best. And they get a little test, says, we'll do this for a few days, and you just watch the difference. And sure enough, they had more strength, more abilities, and they didn't fatigue, and they recovered from fatigue. And it says, okay, you can keep that type of diet. And that's the guidance of these people that are vegetarians and vegans, and that for you it shall be meat kind of hung in their crawl. So I've gone to rabbis, not just any rabbis, but those that have studied the oldest scrolls in Torah. And I say, did the original say, like in King James Version, for you it shall be meat? And they kind of smile. And they say, that's excellent poetry and imagery. They were trying to get across that for you, the herbs and seed-bearing plants would be very important. But the original in a more literal translation would be, for you it shall be sustenance. That is a much more incorporating word, broader meaning. And with this, a very important thing is developed through observation since the 1980s, what I call with nutrition, you can develop personal preventive health. And it makes it possible that whoever's in charge of the groceries, the cooking, your kitchen engineers can excel in things that no medical center on earth can accomplish with drugs. And also it's a benefit to restore health, which we call a deviation from normal, which is illness. And in Ezekiel 47:12 verse, it says, talking about the value of fruits and vegetables, and it said that the fruits and vegetables would be meat, but the leaves of the trees would be medicine for the people. And that's what I fell into in my own experiences, but it was not a new idea. Now, about 10 years ago, I was asked to look at a website from Germany of a company that made dietary supplements. And when I looked it up on the web, I was astounded on their homepage. There was 2 quotations there that they said their company was built around. And the first there is in quotation says, if we could provide the individual with the optimal nutrition and exercise, not too much, not too little, we would have the safest pathway to good health. I wasn't taught that in medical school, and I had never heard of it before, but right beneath it was a quote that I had used many times and heard. It said, let your food be your medicine and your medicine your food. And both of these are from Hippocrates, who lived from 473 to 325 BC. He's credited with being the father of Western medicine, and his beliefs and teachings of this that you see above. He spent 20 years in prison, which is an interesting story in itself. I was so intrigued by these 2 quotations that Hippocrates came up with before the birth of science, certainly before biochemistry was known. How in the world did he come up with this? Well, I found out that he had a biographer named Eustace back in ancient Greece. And Hippocrates' grandfather, father, and 2 sons were all Greek physicians as he was. And all the Greek physicians were taught and believed that illness, disease, was punishment from the gods. And the Greek physician primarily saw patients, and they says, oh, you need to go to this temple over here and to these priests over here, and this is going to be a small, a moderate, or a or for you, you're going to have to make a big gift to make the gods happy so that you can get well. Well, out of this, there was a crony capitalism between the priests in the temple and the Greek physicians. They split all the gifts to the temple and the gods. So that was what was going on. Well, Hippocrates did a series of autopsies and rose up and said, no, no, no. People don't get sick because the gods are unhappy. There's something wrong inside the body. And he started a medical school teaching this, and he observed that optimized nutrition, people got well. The priests and the doctors did not like this, so they went to the government of the Greeks, which was called the hegemon, and the Greeks, in their theology, revered the body. You're aware of the marble statues and all. They worshiped the body of the human being just beneath the gods. And the dead body was considered holy, and it was to be revered. And here Hippocrates had cut up and looked inside and done autopsies on him, so they charged him with defiling the dead. And he was convicted and spent 20 years in prison for this. The reason I tell you this is any new ideas or approaches or philosophy in medicine is responded to in the modern era just about like it was in ancient Greece. Things haven't changed that much in 2,000 years. Now I bring this up, and I have in my hand, which you can't see, and I wish I knew how to flip the camera back to me and away from the PowerPoint, but I have in my hand an artist palette. The palette that when an artist is going to paint a picture, that they will put all the pigments of the colors on it, and with a brush will approach the canvas and make this creation of a picture. Might be a outdoor scene, it might be that of a human being, but that creativity was by the control of all these different pigments on the artist palette. Well, what I show you here is the periodic table for the elements, all the elements on planet Earth, and in fact, out in space, they haven't found any more. There's about 106 on here. All the different elements. This is the equivalent for the creator of the universe and life of an artist palette, because literally about 20 of these elements make up more than 90% of the human body. They're put together and hooked together as compounds. And for example, a common one, you'll see sodium on here. I don't know whether my cursor can point it out, but if you combine sodium with chlorine, you get salt. And sodium pure is explosive if you put in water, but if you bind it to chlorine, you get salt. And in our blood, it's absolutely essential for health and for life. And this is how, that's one of the more simple combinations up there. But if you take carbon and the simplest of all, the hydrogen up here with atomic number 1, and oxygen, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen, those 4 is the equivalent of why I came up with this artist palette, because you can take the primary colors, and as you mix them with a little white, you can make all the hues, you can make all the colors by the combination in the entire spectrum. That when you put a light into a prism and you get the colors from the blues to the reds and all the things in between, well, you can, equivalent to the primary colors, if you take carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, you put together the proteins that make up the body and change. You make the carbohydrates, sugars that make up the body, and the fats. The core of all three are the carbon atoms hooked together in chains, and then you use other pigments or elements on the periodic table to, say, make hormones, enzymes of digestion, enzymes of metabolism. But this is the creator's palette, the periodic table. Now, how does it work? Every cell in the body has an assembly line in it where cellular synthesis takes place. And on the left, if you'll think about it, where I live, there's a General Motors assembly plant. Rail cars and trucks bring parts to the assembly plant. Inside the assembly plant, they have the engineers and designers' plans, and if they hook those parts together properly on the assembly line, out comes the complete products, and they work. Well, every cell in the body, as small as they are, on the right-hand side, you see about what you can see with 1,000 magnification cartoons of cells. How does this work? Well, there's an assembly line in the middle of every cell, and the blood picks up in the intestines parts or nutrient molecules, fats, carbohydrates, proteins, peptides, and dissolves them in the serum, and the heart pumps around the blood that has liquefied these parts for the assembly line in every cell, and then it's taken across the membrane into the cell. And on the venous side, after the cellular synthesis taking place to hook the elements together, make the compounds to operate the body. It's just that fundamental. Now, what I want to show you is this is a cartoon of the assembly line that is in every cell. We have a model on the left center where you see DNA and the nucleus. That's where the engineering and design is coded in nucleic acids or DNA and the chromosomes, that approximately 30,000 of them, they say this day and time. And it looks like under a light microscope that there's a purple area around the central nucleus where the chromosomes are kept. But actually on electron microscopy, which is the rest of the slide, you see three fundamental assembly line steps. The first one is called the ribosome, and in the ribosome, amino acids are hooked together depending on which gene is activated in the nucleus to make peptides and proteins. And you can see a chain of amino acids coming out the bottom, and it says peptide. Now you move to the right and it says endoplasmic reticulum. Let's just call it ER. And the ribosomes come over and connect to it, and that's where the first sugars are added to the peptide chains. Then it moves on to the far right, which is called the Golgi, where you see 1, 2, 3, 4 membranes, called the cis Golgi, the middle Golgi, and the trans Golgi. And in this assembly line, you might call this the finishing shop to finish off the molecules that are put together in the ribosome and in the endoplasmic reticulum. And from this, what you see at the bottom of the slide is all the structures that make up the body. Those that are fixed, like the muscles and the bone and the liver and the kidney. And then we have there, which looks like a little green amoeba. It says macrophage. Well, that's a model for the white cells in the body, because we have cells that are made on this assembly line that wander around. In the middle you see the biochemistry of what goes on this assembly line, and you can see three, it looks like a little pitchfork right there, 3 chains, and there are 9 molecules in it tacked to a peptide. And as you go around, you see it gets changed as it goes around the different steps in the assembly line of the cells. I show you that because those 3 little fork or pitchfork looking things, there are 9 molecules in that, and that is where the most common sugar made in the aloe plant is used to make a domain on the cell surface of every cell in the body. If you look now back over at the original model of the cell over the surface, you can see smaller examples that looks like kind of like shag carpet over it. And in fact, there's so many of them that we only show part of them in this cartoon, but they're over the surface of the cell. In finding this paper in Annual Reviews of Biochemistry 1985, we were able to find out why aloe vera is so important in the nutritional support of the body. And that is what goes on, and the mannoses are added at the endoplasmic reticulum. Remember, that's where the first sugars are added. And then it's modified to make different receptor sites on the cell to make the biochemistry of the body to work. Now, I mentioned at General Motors that the engineers and designers give them blueprints. Well, this is the blueprint information that's inside every cell in your body. This are the 46 chromosomes, or 23 pairs, and to the right, you see them jumbled up. Well, actually, under the microscope, you wouldn't see anything because they're colorless. However, a fluorescent dye has been added that attaches itself to this DNA to give us this greenish yellow color. On the right is one white cell that has been in tissue culture overnight, and a plant molecule has been added that makes the cell get all the pairs of chromosomes together. And if you take a photograph of this through the microscope, you can take a pair of scissors and you start with the longest, which is number 1 over to the left, down to the smallest on the 4th row to the right where it says X and Y. So you go from the largest chromosome down to the smallest chromosome, and looking at this, where you go 22 and then you says X and Y. This is a male pattern of chromosomal instructions. Because if it was female, there would be 2 X's there that look just about the same size, and there's that tiny little Y chromosome that makes up the male genes. I show all this to try to tie the importance of the engineering design of life and the control of cellular synthesis and how important it is. We'll go back to that previous slide, because nutrient molecules are being added on this assembly line to create the structure and the function of life. And this is what controls it all. Well, what difference does this make? Does science show anything to help this? Well, one of the most important things in 32 years of aloe vera leaf gel research, the highest level of science that we've been able to attain is in a medical school-based clinical study. Alzheimer's patients, 46% of them, early, middle, and advanced, improve memory and cognition. That's pretty important when you consider there's over 5.5 million Alzheimer's patients in the United States. In over 20 years, 2 decades of drug research, they haven't been able to come up with a drug to bring back memory and cognition. Here, we found out by giving the patients the active ingredient from the aloe vera plant that 46% of the patients improved memory and cognition, 23% stabilized and did not get better. So I'd say almost 70% benefit. The caretakers of these patients said there was 100% benefit for the Alzheimer's patients because they were all happier, easier to take care of, and more cooperative, because Alzheimer's patients are notorious for being belligerent, hostile, bite, fat, bite, kick, scratch, because they're unhappy people. And so there was 100% benefit on that. Now, we might say, is there any other benefits? We say, well, I'll let you answer the question. This is Michelle. She had an abnormality in her blueprints of life called trisomy 21. At the 21 position, there was an extra chromosome, and that's called Down syndrome. I remember when her mother called up, very excited, because by the age of 10, going to school in special education, she had not learned the alphabet. She could not add or subtract. She could not read. And she was making no progress. And one of the reasons is she had a weak immune system. And the mother said she even missed just a lot of school. If she didn't have a middle ear infection on the right, she had it on the left, or both of them, or in the sinuses, or bronchitis, constantly sick, and she also had asthma attacks. Well, she got the active ingredient from the aloe plant, and here she is at 13. She has come out of special education and is with the other students in the class. She has to have special help. But the mother was just thrilled because she no longer had infections. She had learned the alphabet. She could count to 100, was learning simple math, and was going in regular classes with a assistant to help her. Virtually no medications now. Now at 17 years old, here she is ready to go to the prom, and she graduated in special education from high school and went on to a sign language school to try to teach people to trade sign language. This all came by more comprehensive nutrition built around the chains of sugars, monosaccharides, that are in the aloe plant. Well, here's a case that I was asked because of the cancer patients that we saw anecdotally benefits to get a best case cancer series. You'll see in July 1999, you can see the X there of a big tumor mass, biggest one, and others in the liver of a patient with pancreatic cancer. This is usually a death toll within 6 to 12 months. Well, you can see with them that to prove these cases up, it says 1,000 magnification there. You have to get a biopsy of this tumor through a needle to prove what that big mass is in the liver. And a year later, the tumors are reducing in size and the quality of life is improving. And when this picture was taken the last time, it was 120 months. I want to tell you about Cole in Portland, Oregon. His parents bought a new home and they didn't know the smoke detectors didn't work. And in tears, Cole's mother told how Cole, at about 18 months of age, that the house caught on fire and his 6-year-old brother died in her arms. The baby was in her lap, unconscious, outside the burned house, and he stayed unconscious for 3 years from smoke inhalation damage to the brain. In 3 years, he was in coma, and after 6 months, with improved nutrition built around the active ingredient in the aloe plant, you can see he's got his eyes open, and he has his left arm around a little girl who had been in coma for 2 years, and one mother told the other mother, Cole's mother told Coley's mother what had happened, and she had hit her head in an auto accident on the dash and had been in coma 2 years, and she woke up. Well, the doctor was so amazed, neurologists, biochemists, they wanted me to come up there and tell them why in the world, how this all happened. And this just proves that I make house calls in Portland, Oregon. And he doesn't have good control of his eyes, and he's still markedly brain damaged, but he's not in coma. And those brain cells are doing something because he had a relatively pretty mother. And every time she would come in the room and he could see her, he would start saying, ooh, acknowledging that his mother was pretty. So those brain cells were making some conclusions. Well, it'd be nice to have a little more objective information. Here, at 3 years, is his EEG, or brain activity, at his annual evaluation in the year 2000. 6 months after he woke up, this is his brain activity. You can see all the peaks and all now that he's awake. This is objective evidence that those brain cells are now working. So I told you about the periodic table and the analogy of the creator's plan and engineering design of life and how nutrients are used on the assembly line in life. You can make the decision, does this really make a difference in the health of an individual? Now, in Texas, for over 40 years at the University of Texas, was a pioneering biochemist. His name was Roger J. Williams. He wrote 12 books on nutrition. I interviewed his 74-year-old daughter years after he was dead. And she said the reason he wrote books is that all his research in nutrition was done at the peak of the time of medicine and science, was enamored with miracle drugs. He was an outcast trying to tell people how powerful nutrition was, supporting the engineering and design of life as is coded in the genes inside the body that control cellular synthesis. In his most important book, published in 1971, it was entitled Nutrition Against Disease. In the first chapter, which is titled Why Medicine and Science Has Missed the Power and Importance of Nutrition Time and Time Again, he says, my 40 plus years of research and 12 books can be summarized in one sentence, which I want to leave you with. Again, I can't take credit for all this information that I have provided with you. It has come from lifetimes of others that I have learned from. But in this one sentence from his book, From Nutrition Against Disease, in the first chapter, he says, the human body heals itself, and nutrition provides resources to accomplish the task. This is why optimizing nutrition is so powerful. And the information is in our genes designed to keep our bodies in the normal zone. Any disease or syndrome is a deviation from normal, and the genes are in pairs to either increase or decrease activities to move you to the normal zone, which we experience as good health. One should realize that every day of their life, just like Hippocrates said, if we could provide proper nutrition and exercise, we'd have the safest pathway to good health. Let your food be your medicine and your medicine your food. From over 2,000 years ago, is that a pretty good statement of just exactly what in the scientific era that Dr. Williams has said? The human body heals itself and nutrition provides resources to accomplish the task. Now you're provided, because every day of your life, what you have provided that is adequate or what has been inadequate is influencing your health in the days ahead, in the years ahead. Here's hope that this will help you find a better pathway to good health.